Ready? Good evening. It is 5:30 p.m. on Tuesday, May 4th, 2021, and this is the regular meeting of the Sandpoint Planning and Zoning Commission. And the meeting is now called to order. For the record, I am Chairman Jason Welker, presiding at Sandpoint Community Hall, 204 South First Avenue in Sandpoint, Idaho. Also present tonight are Commissioners John Hastings, Tom Riggs, Kate Weisman, Slade Camp, and Mo Dunkel, just arriving. Commissioner Forshuck is absent this evening. Are there any general announcements or reports from the commissioners or for city staff?
No.
Okay. Madam Clerk, are there any members of the public participating on Zoom tonight?
Mr. Chairman, there is no one, for the record, no one participating from the public on Zoom this evening, and no one from the public in the room this evening.
Okay. We will move on to the next agenda item, which is the meeting minutes approval. I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes from our April 20th, 2021 meeting.
Moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Next agenda item, old business.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'm sorry, I do have a staff announcement.
Oh,
and
okay.
it kind of got rolled into the commission announcement, so I missed over the staff announcement.
Oh,
So
sorry
if
about
you would
that.
give me just a moment.
Sure.
I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce planning and zoning commissioners, as well as any members of the public that are participating tonight, to our new city planner, Susan Lowinger. So she started with us today as her first official day, and she's here for planning and zoning commission tonight. We're really pleased to have Susan on board. She joins us with 19 years of experience as a municipal planner, starting all the way from an intern, moving all the way up to the highest level of planning with the city of Kirkland, right under, and this was a logical next step, was to move into the city planner position. So for clarification, for anyone wondering about the different title, our city planner is our former director of planning. So it's the same scope, it's the same duties that our director of planning have had in the past, but it reflects our restructure where we moved planning into infrastructure and development services. And we didn't want to change all titles at the time, so we left our planning director as a director and our person above our planning director, Amanda, as a manager, which is not typically what you would see on an org chart. So we just cleaned that up with title, but so you know, this is our director of planning, city planner. So Susan, coming from city of Kirkland, for any of you who are not familiar with Kirkland and their planning department, and specifically as Kirkland's planning department's known as one of the premier kind of best practice planning departments across the entire country. It's highly respected for what they've done, their progressive thinking. They've done a lot of annexations, a number of issues, growth issues that are similar to what we are experiencing here in Sandpoint. So Susan brings in a breadth of experience in that regard. She has done work in long-range planning with code changes and working on comprehensive plan, but her love is current planning. And right now we have a lot of current planning happening. So, but she's adept and able to work on the long-range planning as well. Darren Fluke, who you've been familiar with over the last several months, since the beginning of the year, he's been functioning as our interim planner, and we plan to keep him on as a contract basis. And what he's going to be doing is working on overhauling all of our code. So that has been long a strategic priority of the city, and he went to city council at their last meeting with some code amendments, but he's going to be undertaking comprehensive cleanup of the code, reordering, full cleanup, and we'll be taking some time with that. So we expect there will be some public workshops, discussion with this commission on that too. So you'll be seeing some of those things, but it's probably a project that's going to take until late this year. But it will be a full overhaul of code. There are still some code cleanup things that will be coming before council here at their next meeting, not tomorrow, but in 2 weeks in May. and kind of some items that need cleanup due, and we're finding due to the volume of applications coming through, but it will be a full code cleanup, and Susan will be working with him on that, and we're happy to have her on board. I don't know if you want to say anything. I miss Susan, but
You said it all. I sound pretty darn good, thank you. Just a hi, and I'm so excited to be here. I just wanted to let you know that this is the place I want to be. I've lived here since September, so I'm not brand new, but I was working, distance working for the city of Kirkland up until yesterday.
wow.
Yeah, and so I'm so excited to be on board. I know that there's a lot to do. I'm absolutely up to the task. I really hope to be able to usher in, some smart development. I think you guys are already doing such a good job. I really do. And I know you're going to see a lot of me. But, I've been through that process of where just you get this flood of people that just come in all at the same time. And I know how difficult it can be. And again, I'm up to the task, and I think it's actually going to be really fun. I mean, it's not always fun, but it's, planning is something, it's what you make it. But it's also one of the most important parts of a city because everything starts with us. So I'm very passionate about planning, very passionate about this city, and I'm just really happy to be here. And if you have any questions, anytime you want to call me up, just call me up and we can talk.
Tell me your last name again.
Yeah, don't get used to it because I'm going to get married, but it's currently Lowinger. Yeah, so luckily it will be Bowman. I'll be getting married in July. I live in Selly Valley with my 15-year-old son, and my husband-to-be is still in Seattle, but he'll be here in the fall. So just a little personal about me. 2 dogs.
You've already partially answered this question, but I'm curious what brought you from a big west side city to a small east side town?
Well, it was really a conglomeration of a lot of different things. We had already planned to retire here.
But you're not.
I'm not retired. Yeah, no. So what happened was COVID, right?
Yeah.
And so they're still locked down there, by the way, everybody's locked down but it was really a combination of, there's a lot of riots going on there. We were living right in Seattle and, actually it was getting a little bit sketchy. So I decided that since we were gonna retire here, I said, well, let's just buy our house early, and we did that. Right? I mean, we wouldn't be able to afford it now, but yeah, so we went and bought a house last summer, like got right under there, and yeah, we just got in there, and then I just decided that I can't work for Kirkland forever. And it was interesting because they made an announcement that, okay, we're going to have to come back to City Hall. And so then I looked on the website and city planner, what, for Sandpoint, like what, my dream job is just boom right there. So the rest is history.
So coming from Kirtland, are the rumors true? Are we going to be getting a Costco here?
I'll see what I can do, but you really want a Costco? I don't think you really want one.
45 minutes.
Exactly.
We should talk about the trip generation.
That's better.
Yeah. Right.
Well, I was born in Kirkland. and,
Were you?
My family lives out west of Seattle now. Whenever our best family friends live on First Avenue in Kirkland, right up the hill from town, and I'm sure you know them. I'll talk to you after the meeting. Because over the last 5 years, they've been remodeling their house with you probably. And I visit every time I go.
It's a great town, isn't it? Kirkland is really one of the jewels of that whole area, and it has remained so.
Yeah.
And that's because of good planning,
Yeah.
really, mostly, and good city
It's a
government.
lovely town.
Yeah, it's great.
Do they still have the big soccer fields that are down in the valley when you come through
Like, well,
Kirkland? There's like the Totem shopping center, and you drop down a hill, and there's just, it seems like acres and acres of fields. Or is that all
yeah,
developed
there's
now?
there's no more acres and acres of fields, but that's called Totem Lake.
Yes.
Yeah, that has a huge mall. In fact, right as I left, I was helping, I was permitting 2 huge, apartment buildings. added, like thousands and thousands and thousands of apartments in the last even 5 years. So yeah, those soccer fields are,
Not too bad.
Welcome, Susan.
thank you.
Looking forward to working
Congratulations.
with you.
Yes,
Thank you so much.
All right, the final item on the agenda tonight is a brief presentation from city staff regarding the multimodal transportation master plan. At this time, I will yield the floor to Infrastructure and Development Services Director Amanda Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, commissioners. I'm looking forward to bringing an update to you this evening. We are going to City Council tomorrow requesting adoption of the final draft of the multimodal transportation master plan, the MTMP. And if you'll recall, we previously presented some goals and objectives several months ago and had a conversation about that, but we really haven't had a more detailed discussion about some of the solutions that have been provided in the master plan that are being proposed for adoption. And I think that it's worth value for us discussing not only the context of the plan, but also how some of the proposed actions and solutions, I think, will inform some of the decisions that you all have going forward as it relates to our upcoming continuation of the comprehensive plan update, number one, and the land use update that will come with that. But number two, as we're looking at applications that are coming in, just having a broad vision of where the city anticipates we're going from a transportation perspective in the future, I think helps inform your decisions. And so I'm hoping to kind of highlight some key areas that I think will be of interest to you, but this is a really informal presentation. So I certainly open it up for any conversation. I'd really like your feedback in advance of that council meeting. So with that, I will go ahead and share my screen. We previously published an initial draft, as I'm calling it now, since we're at the final draft. I should have numbered the versions. But we initially published on April 7th, and that was part one of a two-part series. The second part was published on April 21st on our website. Since that time, we have incorporated some refinements to the draft, the initial draft. Number one, we added an executive summary. What we heard initially right out of the gate from the public is this is a very large plan and it's really difficult to digest, and I respect that and appreciate it. So we did our best to try and summarize some of the key takeaways from each section of that plan and put it in chapter one. So I'll show you that this evening, and just wanted to give you some background in that regard so that you, when you're looking at our website or you're speaking with the public, that you have that context. So if you're on our homepage, sandpointidaho.gov, if you scroll to the bottom and click on news under the final draft of the city's multimodal master plan, we've tried to break it up into the first section here is just the executive summary. If you're interested in reading just the key takeaway, the cliff notes, you can click here. The full plan, the document itself may be downloaded. And then the other element that we revised from that initial draft is pulling out the concepts that were embedded into the document itself and putting them into Appendix A. So if you just want to look at what are the solutions, what are the proposed designs that are being provided, you can look on Appendix A, and that's pulled everything out that was previously included within the text. So I think it makes it a little bit more user friendly. It's also easier to zoom in on some of those details that were getting lost when it was muddied with some text. So with that, I think, first of all, and I do want to spend most of my time actually talking about our list of capital improvements and actions, but I would like to give you a preview of some of the concepts that are included and open it up for any discussions that you may have with it. With the preface that the solutions that are provided in Appendix A are key projects that really were rising to the top as we did our public engagement and data analysis. So it does not represent every problem that's in the city and or every solution. Really, the complete comprehensive list is located within section 6, and that's where our capital improvement matrix is provided that lists every project that is included. And there are, I believe, 55 total. That total 55 of those actions and projects, it is over $100 million in investment over the next 20 years. So it's certainly going to take some strategic planning from a funding perspective, which we are prepared to take on. But step one really in this whole process is where do we want to get in the next 20 years? And then we can work on the funding details. We didn't want funding to limit the planning, if that makes sense. What are our needs? Then let's find the funds to make those decisions. So with that said, if I can drive my screen here. Here we go. We're referencing Appendix A as networks, corridors, and improvement concepts. The first network that is provided, it's a little bit difficult on the screen to see, but I certainly encourage you, if you haven't done so already, to take kind of a deep dive on your own. This is our pedestrian priority network map. So the orange lines that you see on the screen are representing not the only location where we want sidewalks. We certainly would love to have sidewalks in a lot more locations, but we're identifying as a community and agreeing upon these are our priority locations. For if we're going to invest in sidewalks, we want to do it in a strategic manner and really in a manner that's providing that connectivity that we've all talked about how we have gaps in our sidewalks. So these routes were determined through a walkability study and kind of a walk shed study of where our pedestrian is currently walking, where do we have existing sidewalk, what's the condition of that sidewalk. And we've had multiple workshops on this as well with the public and trying to get feedback. It also, I will add, builds upon, as this entire plan does, past efforts. So our pedestrian and bicycle committee over the past many years have worked really hard to come up with priorities for our community where sidewalks should be improved. And that input was incorporated into this, but just refined a little bit to convey current community priorities in that regard. So I could get really long-winded about this, but I will try to summarize in that if we can agree upon these are our priority routes, the next step with that is developing the policy and sort of the operations side of it of how are we going to improve our enforcement, right? So we've had this challenge in the past of how do we enforce snow removal on sidewalks to make them passable in the winter? And it's been challenging to enforce it equally throughout the whole city. But if we can prioritize our enforcement on these key locations in orange, we're hopeful that that's a more effective approach. So that's one reason to have a priority network. The other is as we're collecting, let's say in lieu fees, or we get grant dollars and we're looking where to spend that money, really strategizing so that we're truly completing a network that provides that connectivity is the intent with this. So I'll pause there to see if you have any feedback, thoughts.
What is the significance of the orange color?
Those are intended to represent the primary pedestrian network.
Okay.
So these are the routes, if all of these were in a dream world built out completely with sidewalk, then the idea is that pedestrians would have options, that they didn't have to walk too far to get to a good sidewalk that provided connectivity.
It appears to me that the orange does not continue on Ontario past Lincoln. There's a lot of pedestrian traffic going up Ontario into the unincorporated and Dover areas. Does this plan contemplate that sort of coordination or integration with the adjoining communities that aren't within city limits?
I would say generally, yes. So it's in two areas. One is in our goals and objectives that we need to have thoughtful and strategic coordination with adjacent jurisdictions. That includes Dover, it includes our sister cities, if you will, to the north, ITD, IHD, all the jurisdictions that we work with in transportation. So generally, yes, it would. Does it specifically call out that we need to coordinate with Dover to help establish additional connectivity here? No, it's not that specific. But regarding Ontario, I'm glad that you brought that up. Ontario is specifically included in the plan in the aspect of the capital improvement list as an identified need, because particularly associated with the recent development and subdivision approval along Ontario, it sort of brought to light the issue that that road is, or made it more critical, that that road is substandard in width. And so it's the substandard aspect of that is included as a capital improvement project that we need to design and complete that section of Ontario, both from a sidewalk perspective, but also as far as its making it more compliant with standards. So it's currently about 19.5 to 20 feet wide, which is substandard for a collector.
Well, a whole section of curb and gutter went in that kind of memorialized that substandard width. What's up with that?
Interesting. So that actually, it's hard to visualize when you're out there today, but the right of way that is available to widen that road is actually to the north. If we were to look at property lines, we have a substantial amount of right of way that we already own to the north, so the widening will be to the north.
Okay.
So that southern property line is actually going to hold true. And it wasn't by coincidence, it was thought out. We did get some additional right of way there. It's just not as much as I think when you're driving down the road, it feels like you should get, because that needs to happen to the north.
Do the orange pedestrian corridors are predominantly sidewalks, is what it sounds like you're talking about. Would they also be those same routes, be what would be striped as bicycle paths, or is that a whole different?
It's a
Okay.
whole different network.
Okay,
Yep, great question. It's the next
I'll wait.
concept. Well, I appreciate that's a great transition.
Amanda, do we know about what our percentage is sidewalk and non-sidewalk in that orange area?
Not specific to just the orange area. We have done some assessment of those quantities. The challenge gets to be where you factor in the condition of the existing sidewalk. So I would say we're at approximately 50% on one side of the road, and that's approximate. We have some streets in this area that have very little sidewalk, and we have others on this map that are substantially complete, right? So, I mean, for example, albeit it's back to the condition, I don't think the condition of the sidewalk or the multimodal path along Division is adequate. We say that later in the plan, but it's shown as an orange line here. So in theory, that's there. Oak Street, it's built out in some areas. It's not built out very well on further to the west. So it's really a combination, but we did do a complete, and it's included in prior chapters, a condition assessment. So
And this is meant to have sidewalks on both sides of the street in these corridors.
that would be ideal. From a funding perspective, the priority would be to provide at least it on one side. If we could complete this network out at least on one side, I think that would be option one, and then continue to do two-sided as we can stretch our dollars.
So is this a capital improvement for the city to finance, or is this for homeowners to be? Like, I know the plan has kind of changed and evolved, and now if there's a certain amount of work done, the sidewalk has to be put in. How? I guess maybe we'll get to that in the future of this.
No, it's a good question.
So,
The answer is it's intended to primarily be upon the city at this point with the orange lines. The way that is reflected in the plan is in the capital improvement section. We have annual budgets that are being proposed. This is not an acceptance of a budget, right? That would be done on an annual basis with city council, but this is to inform those future budget decisions. And we're allocating at this point, we're recommending $50,000 annually be dedicated towards just sidewalks. So the number that's reflected, this capital improvement plan is done in 5-year increments. So it's the 50,000 times 5 years for a budget in that short term of 250,000 to help complete this orange. What that doesn't include or do a great job of reflecting is we're not saying we're only spending 250,000 in sidewalk improvements. That's just like an annual maintenance budget, if you will, similar to our pavement maintenance. We, this year alone, are spending, nearly $500,000 on Pine Street alone from a sidewalk perspective. Investments in Division and other locations also include sidewalk and bicycle investments. So that line item of $50,000, a recommended budget a year, is not representative of the complete picture of how much we're investing or intending to invest in sidewalks overall. If that kind of makes sense, you have to look at all those pieces and recognize that this is truly a multimodal plan. We did not say this project is for for motorists, this project is for bicyclists. They're intertwined.
So how does a household that lives along an orange corridor, how might they be treated differently in the future compared to somebody who lives on a street that's not identified on this network as far as what's expected of them construct in terms of new sidewalk construction?
Yes, so you're not gonna like this answer, but I'm gonna say, great question. We don't have the answer for it. So this is saying, we agree that these are the priority locations we want sidewalks. The next conversation is our policies that go with that. How are we going to enforce it? And that's gonna be its own individual conversation with its own public engagement process, like we would anytime we're updating that type of a code. So it's a great question, and I really am not trying to kick the can on or deflect the question. It's just, this is sort of the first piece in being able to paint that whole picture. So
It's 20 years enough time.
that will be contingent upon funding.
I was gonna say that, I remember 20 years ago, we were talking about it, and it's already been a long
Yeah.
time, so.
Probably not, but I think that if we have not historically invested $50,000 a year in sidewalks. I think if we can have a really well thought out citywide capital improvement plan and strategize in a more strategic manner, I think we'll be the most effective that we can. Anything else on this concept? We get to the bike one now. So the bike map is very similar in formatting. The colors, I won't get into the weeds of all the different colors here. You're certainly welcome to look at it. And I'm happy to discuss it more, but we started this map with what's been adopted, as you may be familiar with previously, Explore Sandpoint. So the Pedestrian and Bicycle Committee did a great job of creating these maps, and they go out and help educate sixth graders about, if you're trying to get around town, this is how you follow a map and do that. And you establish signs to designate those routes, wayfinding, etc. So we took that information and then we added to it. So nothing that's on that Explore Sandpoint did we take away. We just provided additional connectivity was the intent. So in the legend, what we're trying to show is multi-use path that's existing, which is the darker navy green, and then future multi-use path, designated bike lanes and designated shared lanes with some hiking trails mixed in there and where the downtown core is. So it's doing its best to kind of reflect all those different options.
So by multi-use path, do we mean anything that isn't motorized? Because I'm looking here at a place I bike a lot, which is out to the north end of, out to the north end of Division, and then I take a ride on Baldy, and it's a little dicey for a little while, and then a left on Baldy.
Oh, you go left on Baldy, okay.
Right would be worse. I wouldn't even do.
I was gonna say, oh, please,
I
let's
do
talk about
Chestnut or
that. Don't do
something
that anymore.
But I do left on Baldy, and then I go to enjoy myself for a few blocks, and then I get on the Great Northern, and
Yes.
it's not so bad.
Yes,
Are we gonna put something in there that's going to make it less scary for
yes.
people like me? Okay.
Yes, and I can't wait to show you that image. I think it's one of our best. So I have just a couple more, and I think you'll hopefully be pleased with the result. But the answer is yes, multi-use and designated bike lane on Great Northern is the intent, as well as a multi-use path on that section where you take a left and go west to get to Great Northern. That would also have a multi-use path.
Mhm.
What has previously been discussed and included in the plan that is not in this plan is providing a multi-use path and or bicycle and pedestrian access to the east of Division, so between Division and Boyer. That is not included in this plan,
Along Baldy Mountain Road?
correct? And that was done not in neglect, it was strategic in after evaluating and having some really thorough conversations in our community outreach. Chestnut is actually the better, safer route. So in the past, not just here in Sandpoint, but in general, this idea of we have to mix all modes in the same space has kind of been the approach. And that doesn't always fit right. Sometimes that works well, sometimes it doesn't. And in this location, we said, you know what, it doesn't really fit well here. And part of that is a result of all the industrial driveways that we have along that corridor, that really needs to be more heavily focused towards the truck traffic, and that we have a much safer location that we can put bicycles, and that is on Chestnut. So we can continue to improve Chestnut to make it even better and provide signage and all of that. But just this idea that mixing industrial traffic in that corridor, plus we have some significant power lines, power poles. The practicality of that approach, as we kept diving into it, just didn't seem to pan out.
There is a bike lane on the south side of Baldy in that area. Will that remain?
Most likely not. I think that's a conversation we need to have more thoroughly. You're right, the right lane, but on the north lane, not. So it's difficult on a map to, I mean, you could, like on a mountain bike trail, you could provide arrows that show it's okay this direction, but not this direction. I think as we continue to see build out here, we're gonna find that Baldy ends up becoming more and more, we're gonna have more and more driveways. And so whether it's on the south side or the north side of the road, I just think it's too many potential conflicts for
But
bicyclists.
Chestnut is 1 or 2 streets to the south.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's not that far out of the way. And I guess to be clear, it's not that bikes wouldn't be allowed on any other street. Bicyclists could be on Baldy, they could be anywhere they wanted. We're just providing a map saying this is where we recommend you use, and here's your options.
So I can't quite tell. But this kind of makes it look like there's gonna be a way to get from the Long Bridge to City Beach without having to go in town, like we're gonna ride up the freeway ramp.
That would be kind of interesting.
Yeah, so.
And I can see how you're visualizing that there with this map.
Another bridge gonna be built? or-
No, I apologize. It does look like that. Let me zoom in a little bit. I hear you completely. So you're looking at the dark green multi-use line.
Yeah, it has Selkirk Loop Visitor Center written over it, so.
It does. It gets a little bit muddy there. No, the intent is not to cross the creek there. What that's trying to show, and I agree it doesn't do a very good job of it, is that we do need to get from the Long Bridge along Superior and improve First Avenue to get to City Beach is the intent with this map. The line that you're seeing there is more the existing, it's a carryover from the existing pathway that goes underneath that bridge. It's
Yeah.
just the lines got a
Yeah,
little
but
bit.
you just can't get to City Beach without going into town, that's the report goes into that at great length when it talks about the First Street, Bridge Street.
It does.
So, okay, well, I was hoping for a bike bridge there.
I like the way you think. I would
Maybe
like.
in 2040.
Or even 2035.
So I have a question.
Yes.
Early in the multimodal planning at the city council chambers, there was a suggestion by a citizen for the city to open up alleyways for bicycles to kind of create a safer space with lots of access and increased use of those alleys. Could we talk about that?
There was talk about it, good memory. Yes, we did have conversations about that. And I think in the future, that's something that we can continue to have a conversation about. At this point, it's not that bicyclists can't be in an alley, it's just we're not recommending it because they haven't been improved and they are not maintained by the city. So it starts to become a little bit challenging because then at that point, we're asking a private property owner to maintain. If we're saying this is your route, then it needs to be maintained to ensure that's a route. But by all means, our alleys are a public way and bicyclists and pedestrians are able to use them. So, but that's why you don't see it as part of the plan.
Citizens or property owners are required to maintain their alleys for fire truck access, though, aren't they?
No.
Okay,
It's a common misconception, but our fire trucks do not use alleys for access.
okay.
The city doesn't maintain the alleys and private property owners are not allowed to obstruct it with things like buildings because it's not their property. But you don't have to mow the grass or keep the bushes trimmed, that sort of thing.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Amanda, I would like to just bring up part of the conversation that I had with you last week.
Yes.
I've been for a couple of years part of the Trail Mix Committee, which along with the city of Sandpoint and Bonner County, created the Bonner County Trails Plan in 2016. Very comprehensive plan that was never really adopted by Bonner County, but provided lots of recommendations for non-motorized trails and pathways in Bonner County between communities in Bonner County, some of which exist, some of which are in development, some of which could have been adopted by this multimodal transportation plan. And one notably that I thought should have been, and I discussed this with Amanda last week. I'd just like to point it out to the commission and see if there's any thoughts on it. As most of you know, there's the Dover to Sandpoint site work, multi-use path. And currently that, if you follow that to its northern terminus, it ends at Larch and Fifth, where you have the big intersection with the Napa Auto Parts there. And there was a proposal in the Bonner County Trails Plan to carry on north of Larch and have a separate multi-use pathway paralleling Highway 2 down towards Sand Creek, and then carry on through what at the time was the U of I property, what is now the University Place subdivision, the eastern portion of which will be eventually owned by Connexu Land Trust up to the Popsicle Bridge, with the possibility of connectivity to the east side Sand Creek Trail that already exists just to the east of Sand Creek there. I became familiar with this recently, had seen it on the plan, but I also experienced it recently when I had to ride my bike to Mike White Ford 14 minutes before it closed to pick up my truck 2 weeks ago, and realized just how death defying it is to try to ride your bike on Fifth Avenue. Strangely, there's an on-ramp to the multi-use pathway off of Highway 2 there, implying that it's okay to ride your bike along Fifth Avenue and jump on the pathway and then get onto the Sand Creek path. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody, but it made me really aware of the lack of a quick kind of a commuter route between Sandpoint and Pend Oreille. Of course, if you're out for a leisurely ride, it makes sense to cross Bridge Street and follow the Sand Creek path for a couple miles to the east of the creek, winds its way nicely, beautiful, amazing cycling route. Another option that is present here is the Boyer cycle path, which currently has some gaps in it between the railroad tracks, but I think this plan calls for a major improvement of that corridor. But that also is not really direct. It takes you up to Mountain View Road and down to the Popsicle Bridge, and then you have to head south and uphill to get up to the existing pathway that takes you into Pend Oreille. So I just wanted to bring that up. I did get an email from the county today from the Trail Mix Committee. That was discussed at a Trail Mix meeting today, actually, and there were probably 20 people in attendance. There was unanimous support for including that in this plan. So I just wanted to point that out and see if any commissioners had any thoughts on that. So if you can see what I'm describing here, basically just to the west of Sand Creek, there was a proposal in the Bonner County Trails Plan to continue the pathway through there, a little bridge across to the east side of the creek, and the possibility of a trail through the eastern portion of the former U of I property along Sand Creek up to the Popsicle Bridge.
You know, I got a couple thoughts on that, Jason. I too have ridden my bike to car dealerships. Car repair shops. It isn't, often I would instead, well, there's a couple things. It'd be handy if something actually parallel Highway 2 as well. That's what I'm thinking of, because you can, and I'm looking at this map and it shows a bunch of stuff, but when you come out on Highway 2 from the Sand Creek, the trail that, goes over the underpass, and then you're just dumped out there and you're riding in the rail yards, and BNSF is probably unhappy with you, but it's better than riding on Highway 2. And now looking at this map, I'm thinking, wow, it looks like it would be great just to have a connection from the end of the lakefront path, the Bay Trail. And that would take me right up to Highway 2. And that, I guess, is what Pend Oreille is already working on.
Are you Highway 2 or 200?
Well, they seem real close to each other here, and both of them have auto repair shops. So, but I guess, but just thinking in terms of a fast way to get out to the commercial delights of our northern suburbs, I have often thought it would be nice if that trail that dumps you out on Highway 2 if you could somehow cross the street and come up through the RV park and next to the co-op there, that would be a more direct route up into Ponderay for, buying stuff. It's hard on your tires. I got flats out there trying to negotiate that area. So I just think that's an alternative that should be considered, although I guess that's Ponderay, isn't it? It's not, yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Truck routes, truck pedestrians, truck bicycles, truck routes. So this is intended to represent the current truck routes, not the long-term vision for truck routes. We have to implement some improvements before we get to our desired end result for truck routes. I'm gonna zoom out because it's a lot easier from a truck route perspective to see the whole thing. So obviously the state highways are represented as truck routes, designated truck routes. That's a given. We currently have, and this is not a change in that regard, Division, Boyer, some of our industrial roads here, Great Northern, Woodland, up to Schweitzer Cutoff Road, as well as the roundabout. And then thankfully, as a result of some of the changes that have previously been incorporated in our downtown core, the truck routes are no longer along First Avenue and Cedar Street. The intent is that they are along Pine and currently along that little section of Fourth Avenue and the single block of Church. The intent is, as we hopefully continue to implement this plan, that much of this will change. And there is a concept later in this that kind of shows the results of what that would look like. But these are basically our arterials fundamentally in town. That's what you're seeing here. There have been suggestions, and I absolutely respect them, to make some revisions to this right now. Having a current and adopted designated truck route is critical for functionality just within our community. So it would be challenging for us to include a route that doesn't meet a truck route standard right now. So if we wanted to draw a line and say, we think it should be this street instead, or we think that we should take this street off of this map, there are unintended consequences that come with doing that until we've really completed the little bits of connectivity that we need to provide. So the reason we are including this in the plan at this point is because our current truck route map is 20 years old. So it in no way, shape, or form represents what we have today. So we need to update it. And so what's included in this plan is intended to kind of bridge that gap until we can make the revisions that we very much are hoping to, include. And they'll have substantial changes on this.
I have just a question on it. Does any of this information get put into GPS? Because when I'm north of Sandpoint and want to go south, GPS sends me on residential roads rather than on anything else.
I know.
And I'm just curious.
So it's a great question. So we have the ability to reach out to Google, if you will, and say, hey, fix this. You're sending people the wrong way. That can take a lot of time. It is possible, but those applications typically are routing you the fastest way based upon real-time data.
Yeah.
So even if this is included in it, truck routes are a little bit unique, but you as a user, it's finding that route. Truck routes, we do submit to the state. They provide that information to the trucks. But to that end, we still have a lot of trucks that are using Google and it wants to send them on streets, as I'm sure Slate can speak to, that are not so appropriate for them. But
Yeah.
I don't know, did I capture that okay, Slate?
You did.
Okay.
And I know that there's somebody in our IT department trying to do a workaround to keep people off streets like Chestnut, which is signed. The city, met a request to put signage out there. I still think that if we actually had for the industrial area signs and arrows that directed them, that they might be able to override their Google directions, turn left. On a street you shouldn't be.
I don't know, people trust Google.
Yeah, they do. It's just really hard to make the change for them without it actually changing in their app or whatever they're using.
100% agree.
I couldn't help but notice the little Walnut Street piece is missing.
Yes, that's a designated truck route for you. Sorry
Okay.
for Lighthouse. I didn't mean to call you out specifically.
For me,
But
thanks, City of Sandpoint.
it's not for the general public,
Okay,
so we're not gonna
just
kick you
making
off
sure
the
with
street.
witnesses here.
No, it's recorded. No, this is really intended to be what we're representing to average truck drivers, because technically you're a local delivery.
Yeah,
So local
Yeah.
deliveries have the ability to use other streets. So this is more for long haulers, if I could call them.
you can.
Thank you.
And to make our streets safer, from those long haulers that aren't familiar with where families live. I mean, let's just assume that you take a wrong road, families live down there. Do they all understand it or comprehend it? Not necessarily. So we will do whatever we can to make it a safer place for bicyclists, citizens of Sandpoint, whatever we can do.
You guys are, have been really great in that regard, especially in that area. I think as we move forward, your point about signage is justified and well taken. We do have, we've carried forward the need for that wayfinding. And that absolutely needs to happen. It's essential. It's essential for visitors, truckers, whoever we may be speaking about. So
Yeah.
that also is kind of an advantage of us, or not a kind of, it is an advantage of us all agreeing upon what are our routes and our networks. So then we can move forward with the signage effort, right? This is step one of that process.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Very good.
All right. On to the revisions for division.
So Mandy, you said that was the current truck route map.
Yes.
Is there like a proposed or a future truck route map? Are there any major changes to that?
Quasi. So it's later in Exhibit A. The reason I say quasi is because we can forecast what we intend for it to be when when our capital improvements are implemented. The sequence in which those are implemented and the actual conditions have to be evaluated when we revise our truck route map. So for example, if we completed our Baldy extension project, right? And that gets completed in, I'll be a dreamer, in 2 years. Then in 2 years, we need to come forward and not wait 20 years to update our truck route map, because that's gonna really help us update and make it a more accurate. Further, we've identified in the capital improvement list of projects that we need to do a better job of updating our travel models to understand where traffic is and updating our classifications of streets on a much more regular basis, so that we're responding to this growth in a thoughtful manner versus relying on a 20-year-old document, right? So I guess the reason I say that to you is we have later in the plan, if these things are implemented, here are the arterials, and the arterials are typically our truck routes. So what it's going to show there is a better east-west connection on Pine that we could drop Fourth and Church. That would be great. It's going to show that we would have the Baldy connection. Hopefully, Division is no longer, which is a great segue to this slide, is no longer our truck route. And if we get Baldy extension, then Boyer's probably not our truck route either, right? So it just depends on the timing. And so we could have a new truck route map every 2 years, depending on how this gets implemented.
So, then before we move on to division, just because you talked about pedestrians, bicycles and trucks, there still are in this report on PDF pages 48 through 50, I think, or 46 through 48. Yeah, 46 through 48. It's paper pages 41 through 43.
Thank you.
These series of maps with little circles and A's and B's and functional classes and this concept level of service, which turns up in a lot of places, and it appears to me to have to do with minutes that vehicles wait.
That's one element.
Were there any studies of minutes that bicycles or pedestrians wait?
Yes, the answer is yes. I will give just a little bit of background because you're spot on. A level of service type of metric is only one metric, and our plan was not based upon one metric. We looked at multiple data points. The pages that you're pointing to, 41, 42, and 43, are only looking at level of service
To vehicles.
to vehicles.
Okay,
And the reason for that is, for the most part, the limitations of the modeling software. There are some other softwares that we did use to look at a more holistic approach, which is further explained in the document, such as our origin and destinations and our actual, we physically counted pedestrians and bicycles to kind of vet some of the information that the model from a motorist perspective showed. So it kind of takes multiple metrics to really get the complete picture. This is only showing you one picture. But it's an important picture because it's a conversation from a planning perspective that we have a lot, right? An applicant goes through a traffic impact study and they're telling us, okay, we're gonna reduce the level of service at this intersection. These maps are really painting that picture. So that page 41 that you referenced, that's showing this is what it is today. It's a grade system, A through F. It's not only based upon how long a vehicle is delayed, it's also based upon the functionality of the turn movements as well, kind of how the vehicles are moving throughout that intersection, but it's intersection based.
so when they say they're gonna reduce the level of service, that means vehicles are gonna have to wait longer?
Yes,
Okay,
yes, exactly. So if we have an intersection that's a grade A, it's just like getting your homework graded. A is awesome. We've lowered it. Now they're a C. That means that their development is causing this intersection to basically be overcapacitated. It's not functioning like it could. So sometimes you can address that through signal modifications. There's ways to mitigate it, but that is sort of the first line that we look at. It's not the only metric that we consider. So the plan, 42, is saying if we did nothing in our town and we continued to see the growth
right.
that we expect, we're gonna see some impacts to our level of service. What's really important to note with level of service, sorry, I'm probably giving you more response than you want, is it's looking at peak hours. Peak hours are defined by transportation standards. So peak hour is 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Well, we know some of our intersections, our peak times at 3 o'clock when school lets out, right?
Right.
So a true traffic study has to take all of that in and not just look at it with blinders on. Oh, we're only looking at the peak hour. So, but this is a good, it's one metric that will help, I think, inform as you're thinking through these things. The arterials, collectors, and local streets, those are not assigned. We don't look at a map and go, we think this should be our collector. We think this should be our arterial. These pages are based upon the number of trips, the average daily total of trips on that road. So it's again a standard. When it gets over a certain number, it automatically becomes a collector from a local, right? When the trip volumes get above another threshold, it becomes an arterial. We don't assign that. It's a result of what traffic is doing. So that's why you'll see changes in time. Why are they saying this is an arterial? Well, it's because there's that much volume. And we have minor arterials and major. It gets kind of into the weeds of things. But I think it's an important, I'm really grateful to hear you read that chapter. Rose just keeps
Generous
it.
term, but I looked through the whole thing.
Well, thank you. But it's an important conversation because you all are faced with looking at this data from developers and traffic analysis, and this is exactly the type of data that you're looking at. So I want you to have that information.
Unrelated question, getting back to the last topic. When the city decides to reroute a truck route, is that something they can do on their own? Or does the state have to say yes, no?
We definitely collaborate with the state on it,
Oh, okay.
yes, absolutely, because usually all truck routes are integrated with highways.
Right.
We're trying to get them to the highway as fast as we can.
Gotcha.
I will say our Baldy extension project, which we'll kind of breeze through that one, because I think you all are familiar with it. The state is very excited to see that, and they're very supportive of it. So.
That is really good news.
Yes. I was pretty excited.
Yeah.
They said, that's what our highways are for. Yes, we agree. So, okay, well, for the sake of time, I'll try and kind of, I want to give you time to provide feedback on these, absolutely, but I want to make sure we get to the end of the 19 year. So Division Avenue, this is a cross section, if you will, not at intersections. So this is where we're not at an intersection like Pine, for example. We had a road safety audit that was conducted, and this is, trying to convey that we really need to prioritize pedestrians and bicycles on this route because we have so many schools and a library and senior centers, and that is the primary use. This is, and it's detailed in the plan, this image or this section can't happen until we get trucks off of Division. And so it's really critical that we recognize that this is dependent upon the Baldy Extension project. Baldy Extension happens, now we free up trucks, and now we can really do what we want to do. Because if we showed this, and since Slate's here, I feel in good company that I can say this, if we showed this to the trucking industry, they would scream, right? We're saying, don't worry, we'll give you a better route, and then we can do what we need to do with all these bicyclists. So it's providing a wider multi-use path on the west side. The current one is not to the standard we would like it to be, based upon that road safety audit. Bigger planting zones, not just because trees and canopies are wonderful, but also because we need places to put the snow from a maintenance perspective. Still relatively decent sized lanes, because this is still, even with the Baldy Extension, a collector, just means there's a lot of people getting to that location. We have 12.5-foot lanes proposed. Another buffer, as you know, on the east side, which is the right side of this image, there is no buffer right now, it's curved sidewalk. And there are places of that sidewalk that are only 3 feet wide. So this is saying, let's get a real sidewalk there. So this is within the current right-of-way limits that we have. It's not asking for right-of-way acquisition, so hopefully that's being as respectful of those adjacent properties as possible. We still have a bit to iron out with this, you know, UPS deliveries and FedEx and
Probably a few power poles.
a few power poles, and yes. This will take some more thought, but that's the concept. With a slightly modified, same consistent path and sidewalk, but slightly smaller buffer zones at the intersections. I'm going to breeze through Baldy because I think you're familiar with it, but essentially we've talked about in the past with the developments that have come forward, the need, regardless of the Baldy extension, for a signal here at Baldy and North Boyer. The volume of traffic at that intersection is saying this isn't very good. And I know for those of you that have experienced it, it's not only that you wait a really long time, but waiting a really long time means you start to avoid that route. It means your Google's now sending you somewhere else, which is now putting you in a local road that's negatively impacting our pedestrians and bicycles. So it's this fine balance behind, we do need to have functioning intersections because the consequences of not trickles down to our other streets where we really want to focus on pedestrians and bicycles. So then it carries forward, it extends Baldy Mountain to the east and connects into Fifth Avenue or Highway. Now I'm in a blank. That conversation, Kate, I almost called it 2. This would be Highway 95 is where it would connect. So just south of the BNSF bridge that crosses the highway. And then it actually goes underneath in this concept, the Union Pacific Railroad. One advantage is that the city actually, we own this property. So from a right-of-way acquisition perspective, it's advantageous.
Did you say we go under the railroad?
Yes.
Really?
And,
Yes.
I actually,
and then it has
Forgot
its
that
own
road, yeah.
bridge. They build a new
It's
bridge.
like a reverse bridge.
It's like a flyover, right? But
No, it like goes underground. So the current grade, if you were to stand on the ground out there on that property, it goes under, it goes down, and then it'll go underneath those tracks and tie into Fifth Avenue.
Getting our own channel?
So it's going to fit, it's not going to 95. It's not going to the byway.
Not to the byway, good point. So the byway is Highway 95.
Right.
Fifth Avenue is
Highway 2.
also,
it's old 95.
is old 95.
Isn't that Highway 2 now?
It's high,
Because 2 comes in from the west and turns into Fifth Avenue.
it's technically Highway 95 at 200.
Could, still is.
Yeah, it's not two.
I thought that was two.
Okay, so anyway,
There's a transition point.
now this is very exciting. It goes under the railroad track.
Yes.
Because the last I heard that, that was kind of off the table or,
No,
it's been a while.
so what you're saying, yep, good point. So back in previous planning efforts, the, and here we go with our terminology, US 200 corridor. Previous concepts also provided a tunnel through what is now University Place. So Ebbett Way was extended to the east, and then a tunnel went underneath Burlington Northern, as well as a tunnel underneath Union Pacific. That was a little bit too optimistic. And so this plan's revised it to say, just one tunnel, we're just gonna do this one extension. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The other tunnel idea that was brought up in the past that is not viable is a tunnel underneath Burlington Northern on North Boyer. So taking North
Yeah.
Boyer going
Yeah.
under is not viable because of the distance, the length of what that would take. You would run into the Union Pacific track to yourself. And it would be difficult to actually access the properties that need it. So, does that help?
Yes, oh yeah.
We have checked with the grades. The other aspect of this is ITD is planning to lower Fifth Avenue in 2024. They already have plans for that. They're trying to get more vertical clearance underneath that Burlington Northern Bridge. So it kind of works well with our project because we're trying to go under too. Okay, last but not least.
So you hold the leverage, vision, lowering the road. Got it.
Well,
Slam dunk for you.
we'll see. So I hope it's that way, yes. So Great Northern Road, we have presented this on a couple occasions, but not here at Planning and Zoning. So I wanted to give you a quick update on that. The Great Northern Road is currently included in our Northern Urban Renewal area and district. Burlington, or I keep saying Burlington Northern, I'm sorry. That's what happens when I talk a lot. The existing Great Northern Road has been included in that plan since 2005. So we have to have a plan if we're going to have a Northern Urban Renewal District. That plan says specifically we're going to improve Great Northern on the idea that improving Great Northern from a stormwater perspective helps spur economic development. That's really the nexus there, because currently Great Northern serves a bit as a dam, if I can call it that. And the stormwater in that area hasn't been well thought out. That is having an impact potentially on adjacent properties being able to develop those industrial lots in the manner that they would like. So it's about us working with the adjacent property owners as well as this road to find relief for that stormwater. So that was really the primary goal behind the Great Northern Project. Obviously, the road is failing as well, and it's not safe from a multi-use perspective or pedestrian route as we continue to get more residential development to the north. So the project is a full reconstruction of Great Northern. So full width, stormwater, everything included. With that, there are key intersections that need improved. We've all experienced Baldy and Great Northern. It's on a curve, too narrow, lots of issues. So that's included in this to improve.
Is that on the west there? Is that what?
Yes, right here. So realigning that to square it up. A square intersection in the transportation world is much safer than one that's coming in at an angle or a curve from a visibility perspective and a turn movement perspective. And then it holds its alignment running north. I know it's kind of weird, north is to the right. And then we get to Gooby and everything changes.
Yeah.
So, this was, remember how I just said that intersections that come in at angles are not so great. So what we're trying to show here is providing a T intersection and really squaring that up, given the conflicts with the railroad crossings that we have. Making it safer was the #1 goal in this area. We did contemplate, and it's been brought up by the public a few times, well, why not just close Gooby Road? Just make this safer by, omitting that intersection. There's multiple challenges with that. I would say the primary, again, is focused around safety. as we continue to grow to the west, that is our area of city impact. And in the future, if we need to provide emergency services to that area, it would be really unfortunate to not have access at this key location and have to go out and around. And so retaining the UV access was really critical. And then rerouting it further to the east, coming around in a curve, and then working its way north to Woodland. So not much change here, except for adding dedicated turn lanes where there are railroad crossings so that people have a place to queue while they're waiting on, you can continue to go straight while someone's waiting for a train to cross. And that can, this will continue to be refined in the design. But what I wanted to show you was this section, because I hope that Kate is more, this hopefully addresses your question you asked earlier.
Of making Great Northern safer, yeah.
Yes, we have a
Yeah.
12-foot path. We also have the bike lanes, and the reason for both is because we know we have those commuter bicyclists that just want to be in the road, put their head down and go forward. But we still have pedestrians and little kids, that want to ride their bike and feel better, or adults on a multi-use path.
So is the property where the new design Great Northern comes into the airport, is that city property?
Right here?
Yeah,
No, that's a privately owned property. We have been in discussions with them about this proposal. I think it's attractive, again, from an economic development perspective, because it provides opportunities for this that they also own to be accessed that currently is landlocked, because you'd have to create a new crossing. So again, it in all aspects is focused. Yes, we have this indirect benefit of improving safety for all modes on Great Northern, but in doing so, we're also really sticking true to that aspect of economic development. That was not lost.
What do you think is a realistic time frame for this project?
Great question. So we already have a fair bit of funding allocated for Great Northern. Our, if you are in your capital improvement list, we have kind of phased it. So we're saying in the next 0 to 5 years, we are going to complete not only the preliminary design, which we're already doing. So most of these are just concepts, then the next phase is preliminary design. So the engineering is already underway right now for this project, because it's already included in an adopted urban renewal plan. So with that, we need to do right-of-way acquisition, and we need to clean up right-of-way. So that probably will take us a little bit of time. It's a complicated mess, for lack of a better way of putting it. And so once we can kind of get through that, and where we don't have complicated right-of-way acquisition, we can start kind of coming up with phased construction packages. So that's part of the current contract with our consultant that's designing this solution, is propose a phasing plan for this. I anticipate we'll spend a fair bit of amount on our construction investment. I would say in the plan, we're saying as well, around $8 million by 2029 is when we sunset with that. We need to spend it. I do, and it's reflected in the plan. The overall project is a larger dollar value than that. So it will be phased, and we'll continue to look for funding opportunities to hopefully get that project completed in a timely manner.
This, personally, this just seems like such an important project, considering how much new housing is going in North Sandpoint, just to connect that to the rest of our community.
I 100% agree. Okay, motoring through. So Pine Street, this is trying to show us our short-term east-west connection. So in a nutshell, we currently have a lot of cut-through traffic through South Sandpoint. I know all of you are familiar with that. And really, this goes back to the statement I made earlier. It's because we're not providing them an adequate alternative route. So they're getting bound up and not wanting to take this right turn onto 4th Avenue and then a left onto Church and hope you can get out on Church. And so they're finding the path of least resistance, kind of like water, and going through South Sandpoint. So this proposal is saying we're going to close off access westbound from Superior. You'll no longer be able to go straight through South Sandpoint. We'll just do that with signage right up in the short term, and push traffic north on 1st Avenue on Pine, recognizing that the community very much would like to see Pine Street taken back to a two-way in that single block location. So we have worked really, really diligently with ITD and done an extensive amount of modeling to support the fact that we can make this change without negatively impacting their system, which is an important aspect. I mean, when we're talking about including changes in our plan on another jurisdiction's road, it's really important that they're on board with the solution. We could put a solution in our plan that they're not on board with, and then we'd be fighting uphill the whole time. So we've done our best to partner with them on these solutions. So they are on board with that because the data supports it. If in the future the data has changed and it doesn't support it, then have to have a conversation again. ITD is very database driven in their decisions, so the modeling does absolutely matter.
So if I'm coming home from the Long Bridge, I will now have to take a right on First and go up Pine all the way to Boyer if I want to go into South Sandpoint?
It depends on the phase of the project. You could certainly get on Pine and take a left on Third or Fourth if you wanted.
Oh, I see. Yeah, okay. It's just at Euclid that I can't, and it's Sixth that I can't.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to go through straight on Superior is really what we're changing here. What we're trying to prevent is, let's say that you work at City Hall and you live in Sagal, right? People are cutting through South
I
Sandpoint to get to City
see,
Hall.
I see. Okay.
So what we're saying here is use the more efficient route. Did you just raise your hand?
I think
Some
Forrest
people in town.
might have something to do with this conversation. Everybody goes right by his office.
Like Google does it. I mean, that's true.
Yeah.
I know.
That's where
Darn
Google's gonna
Google.
send you. It's not like they're cutting through, they're following directions.
Because it's the path of least resistance, because our arterial systems are currently not functioning the best that they can.
Well, a lot of people live in South Sandpoint do that. I used to live on Euclid. It's just a really common way to go through
Yep.
that part of town.
Yep.
But yeah, it's residential.
It's just too much volume.
Yeah.
In fact, I will confess that our engineers, it was funny, they said, is this really a problem or is this a perceived problem? Because that's a valid question at times, right? And so we did a lot of data collection and they were blown away. They're like, yeah, this is a real problem. I mean, we stood out in the intersection with 3 people, not machines, people, and literally just counted. And it's remarkable.
I think the stoplight pole is still there at the end of the
It is.
so.
I don't know if it meets current standards, but yes. It is still there. Okay, so long-term, this solution is showing, okay, fast forward to the future. I don't know if the future is 10 years, 20 years, at which point all of these things may be implemented. But we anticipate as a result of just sheer volumes of traffic, that we're gonna find a need to add signals at these locations. We're gonna talk just briefly about some changes at Bridge and First, and then we do anticipate needing to move forward with the couplet. So not the curve, but the couplet. And basically a couplet is sending northbound traffic on Fifth Avenue and southbound traffic in what is currently the parking lots. Those parking lots are owned by ITD right now. And that is their right of way to put the highway. What this plan has revised and I think arguably improved is we're no longer putting in a road and wiping out several businesses. Really the objective with this was make the data work for sure, make it safe, absolutely, but do everything we can to avoid wiping out businesses. And so in this application, it's one business that would be taken out, and that's Melody Muffler. I have spoken with him myself, and he's incredibly excited about this project. It was the easiest conversation I've ever had with anybody, so I really commend him for his understanding. And we have an agreement actually in place that we have signed back in 2017 that says when the level of service at the ITD intersections gets to a level of D, so basically they need to function at a level of C or better, that we have agreed to implement the curve. And I think that's something that's maybe been lost over the years. We've already agreed to that project. It didn't go away. It just got postponed. And so this is saying, okay, if we're going to do that, how can we do it in a way that Sandpoint's hopefully a little bit more on board with, and we're not impacting as many businesses and it functions. So
So, on that Church Street, this whole couplet idea was discussed at great length 5 or 6 years ago, and we decided not to do it and convert one block of Pine Street to one way and have the bulb out and keep the trucks from going through the, why are we coming back? Were we right the first time and we should have acted on it? Why are we coming back to this now?
great question. We're going back to it for 2 reasons. We're going back to, I don't think that we were wrong. I think that we made decisions based upon the data that we had at the time. We've now felt those changes. And I think the fact is that sometimes there are unintended consequences. The unintended consequence of making Pine Street for one block, one way has resulted in all this cut through traffic through South Sandpoint.
Yeah. that
We
makes
took
sense.
our main line of a pipe and we put a hole in it.
Right.
And so now the water's going everywhere else. And so because of that, we're saying we gotta repair that pipe because that's where we want the flow to go. And by doing that, we're actually making our local streets safer. So I don't think the decision was wrong, but as far as the couplet itself goes, I think we were concerned about how many businesses it was impacting, as I understand it. Number one,
Doug's was threatened. That was.
completely wiped out.
Yeah, that was on the oval.
Or that was
the curve.
The
Yeah,
curve
right,
oval,
okay.
it had a big like oval shaped roundabout in it.
Even the concept of just moving the signal, because of the turn lanes that were required for the size of that intersection would wipe out. So even without a roundabout at that location, keeping the signal at that location in the long run would take out dubs. So what we're doing in this application is, and that goes back to me saying, we think we can do better, is moving that whole signal further onto city-owned property, which is the park next to the garden. Dubs Field. In the past, ITD has avoided impacting a park like the plague, rightfully so, because most communities don't want that and federal funding doesn't want that. But as the city, we can absolutely say, hey, these are our priorities and we're okay with this. And then they're all on board. So I think back to your point, Kate, when we got rid of and we said no to the curb at that time or the couplet, we said no right now. We have an executed agreement with ITD that says when the level of service at those intersections, at Boyer, at Division, at Pont or Church, at Cedar, when those drop below the acceptable, ITD's acceptable level of service, we have agreed to do it.
And what is ITD's acceptable level?
C,
So
On a
we're already
highway.
there.
that's right.
Okay.
So we're trying to be a partner at the table of saying, okay, we agreed to do this, but we'd really like to do this on your road in this way. Because although this is within city limits, it's their road.
Their money.
Primarily, it's their money, yes. We lost a lot of that funding. We came out of the budget. It was in their budget, and that decision got us out of their budget. And we're currently not in their budget, and they budget 8 years out. So we kind of lost our seat at the table at that time, but we're hoping to get back in.
So in this plan, Melody Muffler doesn't end up like the Turban built around.
I'm gonna refrain from commenting. I'm just gonna skip over the next one.
Love going to Melody Muffler, but
I know, they're really wonderful people.
Yes.
Okay, so Bridget first. This is the short-term concept. Back to level of service, although it's only one metric. I do just want to note, because it is a data point that kind of helps give a visual, is during our peak season, during a Saturday, we've actually counted data. We've done pedestrian, bicycle, vehicle counts, every turn movement, and this functions at an F today without our
Wow.
additional growth on a peak season Saturday, F. It's terrible. It's terrible for all users. And so this short-term solution is really taking 2 factors into consideration. We know we have a final phase of our downtown improvements. So how can we improve this final phase, this intersection, with a long-term vision in the future so that we're not reconstructing what we just built, right? We don't want to build something in the short term and then in the long term realize, whoo, we got to do something with this intersection. Now we got to rebuild First Avenue and Bridge. So we're saying when we go to do the improvements on First Avenue and Bridge Street, this is where we like the sidewalks to be. This is the cycle track. We're improving bicycle connectivity with a cycle track itself. We are improving by taking the current private parking lot that runs parallel to Burger Dock, the Realty, Starbucks. We're taking that parking lot away and kind of shifting that parking more into a public right of way and improving their frontage by giving them sidewalk in front of their businesses, making them look and feel like the rest of downtown. Because the exit for that parking lot is way too close to an intersection. We talk about our intersection standards, right? That's like off the charts, not acceptable. So that is intended to improve safety for all modes. And then we're saying, okay, we are also going to be improving the width of our sidewalks. And so that was really in conjunction with improving this plaza area, Farman's Landing. We exchanged property to enable this plan to provide for the wider sidewalks that are really needed there to accommodate the volume of pedestrians that we have. So with that, it's a short-term plan. It provides some planters, if you will, some temporary planters when we're in peak season, not during snow, to prevent those left turn movements that you're not allowed to do southbound currently. So that's kind of the short-term plan. But we know we're already at an F, and the sense is that at some point, the frustration with this intersection is going to have a tipping point. And if and when it does, I don't know when that's going to be. That's really for our community and council to decide, not just the data. It could be a year, it could be 2 years, it could be 20 years. I don't know. But we're going to get to a point where we're going to say enough's enough at this intersection. We got to do something. And this plan is proposing that something, albeit there's no perfect solution at this location, would be to actually block off movement at this location.
Wow.
So between Church and Bridge, it becomes more of a plaza. And we provide free flow this direction. This portion of First Avenue becomes more like a parking lot, if you will, with 90-degree parking stalls so that you can come in and out. And this solution from a pedestrian perspective, a bicyclist perspective, and a motorist perspective, we looked at all metrics and it goes to an A for all users.
Wow.
So from an F to an A. We've looked at, our engineer could tell you how many, but at least 6 to 10 different alternatives and various versions of those. Even a signal at this location actually hinders pedestrians and makes it worse than what they have today. So we've looked at European scatters and I mean, everything you can imagine at this location. And this takes us from an A to an F. However, this is, thank you, an F to an A. I've been talking for a really long time. So I apologize, thank you. So it has a significant improvement on it. It is a big change, and big change takes a little bit of time to maybe warm up to. So I don't think we're ready for this now, but if we get to the point in the future where the community says we got to do something here, maybe this is what we'll consider.
I don't know, I think they would like it because it's the most contested area. When the whole traffic revision happened, that area was, I mean, we went back and forth how many times on what was the stop sign and no turn, and then wouldn't that also remove the need for a light at Pine and First?
It doesn't.
Really?
I
I
know.
don't think we're trying hard enough. Just for the record, stoplights restrict the flow of traffic worse than anything. And right now in town, on Fifth, it's already becoming a problem. The church on Fifth light there's stuff backing up and then we're in the middle of
Because
the
it
day.
doesn't function properly, but yes, I agree with you. If it's not functioning properly, it can have really negative consequences. The intent, if they function correctly, is that it actually improves flow and provides a valve for that light. but I hear you, if they're done wrong, it doesn't work out really well.
Mhm.
But we're gonna have so many trips at this location that a four-way intersection would not function as well as, or a three-way intersection, I'm sorry, at Pine and First, would not function as well as a signal. We anticipate, but we have to let the data tell us when that's actually, valid. Because maybe it never will get there, I don't know, but we, based upon forecasted growth and trips, we anticipate it will become justified.
I think an attractive pedestrian plaza down there would definitely improve its salability, for sure.
How does the city roll out something like this to the public for their opinion?
So that's a great question, Slate. All of our projects in this plan require further public engagement. They all need a complete design process with them and their own individual public engagement process. The conversation's not over. It's actually just saying, these are the conversations we need to have. So we would handle it just like we do with our downtown streets project, or just like we've done with any of our capital improvement projects over the years. It would take a lot of engagement, particularly with the businesses that are adjacent to this. So
the businesses, and then maybe what else is the argument against it? I mean, I can see a couple things, but what are the valid big concerns with it? Because I feel like it's more welcome than a lot of changes that we've looked at.
I don't know that I'm best to say whether it's a valid concern or not. I think everyone's concerns are valid in some aspect. I think that the two primary concerns I've heard, and Jennifer can weigh in, is number one, this is a gateway to Sandpoint. It's holistically changing what our downtown looks and feels like. That's one position or perspective. The other is that we are blocking off access and through visibility to our downtown businesses, and that this may move people away from utilizing those businesses. I would say those are the two primary concerns.
I think just in general, it's a shocking change.
It's a big change. Kind of like the two-way reversion, the byway. Change is hard. It's gonna take some time to warm up to it.
And I think the other element to it is, as it limits for people who are coming in town, not knowing where they're going. And maybe they haven't gone the right way. They've got to circulate through City Beach. And, as we move forward with the design of that and that new parking lot, that will hopefully provide for better circulation, because circulation at the beach itself isn't good on a packed day either.
That could be an unintended consequence. There's a lot of U-turn traffic at City Beach. Saying, how did I
Yeah,
get
it would
here?
take some significant signage. That is 100% right.
Well, in high school, we used to cruise the beach all the time. So, like,
You
that
still
doesn't
do,
happen.
You're dating yourself now.
But it's true, if you're coming.
I got
into
totally
town,
busted by her cruising the beach.
It's pretty much, if you go, unless you turn on Pine Street, you're going to the beach.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So, yeah, we have to do something pretty significant. It reminds me when I first moved here, no matter where I wanted to go, I always drove along First Avenue, because I'd get to Fifth and I couldn't turn, I was coming from South Sandpoint, I couldn't turn left on Fifth. So I just kind of went where the road took me, and I mean, even on my way to Ponderay, that's kind of how I went until I figured out the vision existed. And I think, yeah, that's gonna happen. And if people take a left on Pine and they wanted to go to the beach, they're gonna be bummed, and they're gonna try to go around the corner, and they're doomed. They'll never get to the beach.
well, they just have to turn right on Second and go to church.
So,
Thank you, Slate.
But they'll need overnight accommodations there.
Get a milkshake and try again. Okay.
That is a point. If you're on the north side of town, you want to go to the beach, it's a much different route. But I think that
It's not that.
if we're only,
different, actually.
I think a lot of us look at this as like we're coming into town, like from the south. But from other directions, it kind of makes sense, because I feel like it does a better job of putting people on Pine Street.
100%.
And that's what we want.
Yep.
is We don't want people driving through town that are trying to just get through town.
Good point.
Exactly. Yep. And if you just want to come to the beach and go back south, then just stay here.
Well, a whole lot of those cars in the summer are gonna have big boats attached to them.
Yep. We're absolutely right. So anyhow, the intent is to improve safety for all modes with this, including how to get a bicyclist safely to City Beach. This was not the perfect, but it's proven to be the best, I think, solution. So we'll see in time.
But the temporary one with just planting,
Yeah.
that's not cutting off the two-way traffic
No.
there, yeah.
It's just allowing for what happens today
Right.
with a little bit of a barrier, like, no,
So,
don't just ignore the
A
sign.
more significant barrier to taking a left-hand turn.
Yes, but because so much of the volume is trying to go south, we're actually in that application sending people north to send them south. So they're forced to go through our town to just get back south with their boats and their RVs and all of those things. Or they're just using church and getting to the poorly functioning signal there. So that's the thing with transportation, right? One little action over here really affects the whole system. So. Okay, I'm not gonna get into the weeds of this one, just for the sake of time, but please spend a little bit of time taking a look at these concepts in detail. We are proposing to close off access to some of the skewed intersections along Highway 2. This is definitely Highway 2. It is not 95 or 200. I will point out the most significant change, and that would be in the future adding so as a result of closing off these access points, we gotta provide another, I'm gonna stick with my pipe analogy, we've gotta find another avenue that is efficient. So we're proposing to add a signal here at, and I can zoom in on the other section, here at Ella. So Ella currently doesn't go through, but we're saying, well, we would really like for it to. And further in the plan, you can kind of see that zoomed in.
What road comes in from south Sandpoint at Ella? Is that Michigan?
Yes, Michigan. And the next map, I'm gonna answer that question with this one. So slightly different format than the pages we were just talking about with the level of service, but this is trying to show with all the improvements, it's a different way of looking at it. What are our arterials gonna be? What are our collectors gonna be? If all these improvements. So we did a good job, I think, in our other images of showing what happens with Pine and some of these key arterials, but not what's the consequence of doing that. So the consequence of doing that would be, I'll show the first one, is that Boyer goes from, or not Boyer, I'm sorry, Division goes from being an arterial, if we get our Baldy connection up north, to a collector. So reducing volumes on that would be the intent. And then Ella becomes more of a collector, and Michigan as well. So currently Euclid is a collector, but we anticipate with these improvements that this would be the result. So I think it will be interesting to see how the improvements happen in sequence over time. We'll do our best to prioritize them in a way that this is the result. It's just going to be a timing thing. Of what street becomes a collector versus an arterial. Back to that conversation. So then this is just a zoomed in version of what was just shown. So I'm not going to go into detail on these, but realigning this, actually I will for 1 second tell you about this plan. This was pulled directly from the US 200 corridor plan that was put together a few years ago. It was a solid concept. And so that was carried forward. And we show the existing light here to remain at Division. We show some realignment. This is at Michigan and Olive, where we're actually closing it off completely to Highway 2. Can't get out, can't get in. And the idea behind this is that every access point on Highway 2, and the number of them, is causing conflicts. Those conflicts, this is where we have our highest incident rates, both for pedestrians, bicycles, and motorists. Is the more access you have onto a major arterial like this, the more your risk goes up, which is kind of common sense. We also have the skewed angles of those intersections that everyone has experienced firsthand how crazy that can be.
So on this, where Ontario crosses Highway 2, it will, for cars, it will be offset by quite a bit. If you're on a bicycle, do you go to that new public plaza and cross there? or-
Yes.
Okay.
Is there pedestrian crossing at Michigan?
At Michigan, so it's just a further up to the,
On that one
Northeast.
there,
yeah, it's further up to the northeast existing, this little caption, kind of walking.
but then, so there is pedestrian access in that picture somewhere. I'm just thinking of the lunch crowd from school that will
Yeah,
be walking.
no, they
to all
still
the
need to get here for sure. It's right under this white box.
restaurants. Okay.
Yeah, and Highway 2 is known as not having any place to cross besides like there and stoplight,
Mhm.
and then all the way down at the next stoplight. So there's like a long stretch with no way to get across.
Safely, yeah. Yep, so that's the intent of Ella. And so that, if you look at the map holistically, like the whole corridor from Division all the way up to Larch, the intent with signals is they should be equally spaced. And that's really what the end result is and why Ella was chosen over, say, another intersection is to make sure that's relatively equal spacing. Because if it's too far away, you won't go that way, you'll find an alternative route. And then last but not least, Florence, oh, that is probably one of the, look at all those arrows. So similar to what we were just showing at Michigan, we're saying no in and no out here at what is Superior and Florence. So this would kind of function in the reverse of what we just showed.
But that's where GPS sends you.
I just have to take a right. and just- So,
You know what this reminds me of is Boston.
oh boy.
You take a right,
That's good.
you want to, and you want to go around the block, you end up in Rhode Island. And you that's where you plan to go.
Well, hopefully here you just end up at Winter Ridge or Dutch.
This is an overlay on a design that worked 100 years ago. Wow, it's gonna be a challenge for folks hauling trailers.
Change will be very difficult.
You know, well, I think having Google Maps actually really will help, assuming, once Google Maps
Updates.
gets it correct.
Yes.
That's the space, it's.
Oh,
this is
yeah.
Not like, this, people would leave town, it would be great, we'd probably.
I guess it depends on our strategy. So, no, it would not, it will happen in phases. It's gonna happen based upon funding. And this plan, just like our water master plan and our sewer master plans and our parks and rec plan, they're all culminating into a comprehensive citywide capital improvement plan that's typically a 5-year look ahead of, okay, in the next 5 years, here's our priorities. And where can we have overlap in those projects? If we're doing a transportation project, we should probably do the water project that goes there too. So we've never done that before. We've never looked at all of these in such a holistic manner and came up with that prioritization that's needed. This plan doesn't prioritize them. That's the next step. This is just saying, these are all the pieces. Now we got to figure out the puzzle.
And having a holistic plan, I would think would be greatly increase your likelihood of finding grant funding.
Yes, and implementation,
Yeah.
exactly. So we're really excited about it as staff, and I'm incredibly grateful that you all have spent the time to read it and engage. And Jason, I do want you to know that we did update the goal with the level of service. The final version does provide the correct one. Our initial draft, Jason did a great job of catching some typos we had, so I appreciate it. I call them our mulligans, no, not mulligans, what's the word? Malarkeys, where we're putting in things, you caught them all, so I knew you read the plan, and I appreciate it. I think these conversations are really helpful as we continue to move forward, and I think I've already highlighted the things in the capital improvement plan I wanted you to know, which is that we are going to invest in further conversations, such as the modeling updates more often, and some of those aspects. What we didn't talk about is our area of city impact. That is a recommendation in this plan that we need to start planning transportation wise as well for our area of city impact. But that's a conversation to come in the future. So if you have any questions going forward, this is going to council tomorrow. We'll see what decision, if they make a decision tomorrow. But I am always available if you have questions.
So the decision tomorrow is to move it all forward or to the next phase.
It's to adopt the plan.
Okay.
And adopting the plan helps inform our future decisions as far as applying for grants. Us being able to say, we have this project in a master plan that's been adopted, really helps make our application stronger. So it does that. It also informs that capital improvement plan that I mentioned to you. And it gives us as staff action items. One of those is we really need to look at our illumination better in this town, right? That's a safety aspect from a transportation perspective. We didn't do that as part of this plan, but the community and city council saying kind of as a directive to staff, you need to move forward with these things and it can kind of inform that prioritization.
You also have to have this capital improvement plan for impact fees.
Thank you, Fonda. You're welcome. So our impact fees are based upon adopted plans such as this one. And so our current impact fees will be updated and this plan will help inform that. So that our impact fees that we're collecting are moving, intended to move forward with these types of projects.
Getting back to the beginning of the meeting and your concern about the bicycles options just as you're exiting to the north, is there any reason that we would want to take an action on that and make a recommendation to city council if they are adopting this tomorrow? Or is that not appropriate?
Well, I appreciate that, and
Okay.
it's not really my order to say this. I apologize
Okay,
if I'm
no.
speaking out of turn, but this was not presented as an action item on the agenda.
Okay,
So I think that might be one element of challenge.
Yeah, it's not an action item.
gotcha.
Council would be free to watch the video of the meeting tonight, though, if they wanted to know what your questions and commentary are. And quite
Right.
frankly, we would encourage them to do that.
And if we felt that way, we should attend tomorrow's meeting.
You bet.
Yeah, oh, that'd be great.
You bet.
As citizens.
It's right here, right?
Yes.
Yeah, right here.
Right there.
You get to sit over there.
Oh, right.
And you won't have a name.
As commissioners, can we take one of these chairs over there and sit?
That is not my decision.
Fall asleep.
This chair has my name on it.
Yeah.
So I went to one of the public workshops. I can't remember when it was, but it was at City Hall.
Okay.
And I was surprised how much public input there was and a pretty big variety and like a lot of really good ideas. And I feel like a lot of those things were brought up are in here. And so I'm kind of blown away, really. I didn't think, after being at that meeting, I thought there's just way too much. Like, people want a lot, but, and I know it's not like, we're gonna do it like right now either, but no, I'm surprised. Yeah, I think it's really well put together.
I really appreciate that comment. Thank you so much.
Well,
To me, the timing is so amazing. It just seems like it's like this perfect, you have all these needs and you have everything that we've been going through and the influx of the population, the ideas for it. I really like it.
And Susan gets to be here.
I
I was trying to put myself in Susan's seat
Yeah,
during this, like
really.
all those maps, like, you have to live here for years to be able to. Like, I have no idea what part of town this is in. If you're brand new to town.
It's also got to be a great perspective to have no preconceived notions of what's been there and just
Yeah.
blank slate. What should we do? I would think that's a refreshing thing as well.
Yeah, Jason, you're totally right about that. When you're looking at these aerials, you're going like, well, there's Babs. Okay, there's
Yeah.
Six Star Automotive. She has no
There-
idea.
There's my
I've
house.
been here a lot.
Yeah.
I know a lot.
I live in the middle of all this.
Yeah.
I still struggle to see
Yeah.
what we're looking at some days, so.
To Susan's credit, if I could just chime in, she actually corrected me on an intersection that I
Oh,
said. I put
good.
two streets intersecting that don't intersect in my,
Yeah.
so she's like, really? How does that work? Well, it doesn't. Let me correct my statement. So
That was just a test.
she knows quite a bit already.
Yeah,
I don't know all the streets, but I'm getting there.
Good.
So,
well, get a bike and just explore.
Yeah,
It's a
I
great
need-
way to do
I need to
it,
get a
seriously,
bike.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Amanda, that was just amazing, like,
Yeah.
it is really exciting to see all this
Thank you.
come to fruition. So, I don't think there's any other new business on the agenda tonight, so we will adjourn if there's no further comments or questions. It is 7:13 PM.